What if the Big Ten is right about the college football playoff after all?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we asked Sam Hutchens of the Clarion Ledger what he's looking most forward to this Ole Miss football season in the second segment and get his thoughts on the recent Chris Beard Hoops interview in the third segment. But first, we find out how Ole Miss and the SEC are obligated to choose a playoff option, but the SEC and the Big Ten are currently on opposite sides, as usual, of this debate. But here's the kicker. The Big Ten is likely right. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Really good stuff there. Listen, Ole Miss and the SEC will end up on the wrong side of history if they press for this 5-11 playoff model, because that would absolutely ruin college football. It sounds counterintuitive, but the Big Ten is right on the playoff and on this.
I almost have trouble, Steven, making any too definitive statements, just because I feel like the second once anyone introduces a model, it'll just become tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. We kind of thought that this model was something we could rock with, the 12 and then the non-straight seating. And then the second they get an actual bracket, everyone's like, wait, this is kind of messed up, and now we need to eliminate the straight seating. So that's just what frustrates me about this whole thing is I feel like nothing is so permanent that these people can come up with that won't be tweaked if the result is that next year when it's new, it turns out that, oh, this isn't exactly what we expected.
Yeah, I think the important thing for people to realize is this is not forever, this model. And whenever they say the 4-4-2-2-1-3, I guess that's what it is, it's only for 3 years. So if your conference has a renaissance and kind of gets higher up in the college football pecking order, that number can change in the next time they do the playoff rankings. But my thoughts on this is the regionality of college football was starting to get lost. The playoff is a big part of that. The Big Ten has teams all across the country now. The only regional Power 4 team is actually the Southeastern Conference now. But
sure,
the 4-4-2-2-1 sets it up to where the regular season becomes more important. The conferences become more important. All of the stuff that we love about college football can coexist with the playoff if you do this. College football has always had a weird system throughout its whole history. At least this way, we can have some of the stuff that we fell in love with, as well as having a college football playoff of 16 teams. That's my thought.
Agreed. I thought what made this last season covering Ole Miss, and I know you were, of course, locked in for your coverage to Ole Miss, what made last season so much fun or just such a roller coaster was the losses still felt so penalizing. Like that Gainesville loss, you kind of knew, oh, the Rebels, like the door has slammed on them. And even the Kentucky loss, like everything just felt so huge. Of course, that LSU loss. So that's, I think, always the fear. And maybe it was too overblown. I remember, Steven, when people first floated out the whole 12-team playoff format, or even maybe even the 4-team playoff, people thought, oh, like losses aren't going to matter anymore. And I don't think that we've gotten to that point yet. So I'm almost cautiously optimistic to think that even moving to 16 or something down the road, I'd like to think that losses would still feel just as penalizing, but I don't know.
Yeah, not in the 5-11 model, especially with the SEC trying to tweak strength of schedule. Watch the Josh Pate podcast for his description on strength of schedule tweaking and all of those at-large berths. There's 11 at-larges in the 5-11 model. And with the SEC demanding strength of schedule tweaking before anything happens, you're looking at 6 or 7 SEC teams in the college football playoff, like an 8-4 SEC team. If Florida goes 8-4, the regular season would absolutely not matter. In the 4-4-2-2-1 model that everybody's freaking out about the automatic qualifiers, at least 2 of the automatic bids that the SEC would distribute would not even be given until the championship Saturday in those play-in games. The only thing that would matter about the regular season is non-conference losses would not hurt you anymore. You can play whoever you want to, which for the fan, that's a mighty fine prospect. I'm telling you, the Big Ten is right on this. The SEC and Ole Miss is kind of wrong what we're coming out of the SEC spring meetings against.
I sort of think too, it's these commissioners, they'll have it in their mind, like, think back to the ACC, 4 years ago, had 2 just absolute juggernauts, Clemson, Florida State, like they could bank on those 2 teams. And then if you look at what they're arguing for today is probably completely different based on, what are your top dogs that you can bank on year in and year out if you're these conference commissioners, because everyone in the conference commissioner, the people that are throwing a lot of this weight around, they're of course doing their job and lobbying for their conference. But the issue too is like what these commissioners want changes. Some years you have the top caliber teams and then not a lot behind them. And then other years you have maybe not that elite 1 or 2 teams, especially if you're not the SEC, but you have a decent amount of weight behind them to say, hey, our whole strength of conference should count a little bit here. So it's just it's like this. It's like trying to be still on an ocean when everything's constantly moving and no one has any chance here.
Yes. It's like Lane Kiffin came out and said, hey, let's just take the top 16 teams all at large. And everybody's like, yes, a college football coach said that. Nobody would agree to that. That's not an option because nobody would vote for it. The Big Ten is completely dug in on the 4 automatic qualifiers. The SEC is the conference right now that is waffling. And if the SEC can just do it, they could end up saving college football instead of kind of trying to be Santa Claus to the Big 12 and the ACC and said, hey, this 5-team, 5-11 model, we would be all in favor of. It bothers me that the SEC is kind of playing politics on this because the reality of the situation is only the Big 10 and the SEC have to agree. The ACC and Big 12, they just have to be consulted a little bit, which they've done. But the way it's set up, you just have to agree with the Big 10. So you can't pick a fight 6 months before you have to decide how this is going to go. You've got the playoff model given to you. You can't pick a fight with each other at this point. I think at this point they should be putting finishing touches on stuff instead of fighting about, I don't know, performative things.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what those, not only the scheduled conversations in Destin were like with those SEC meetings, but with all the conversations in the back rooms and at the hotel bars and stuff. Like, it's just such a mess right now that you're right, Steven. If the Big Ten and the SEC get on the same page, that is what's happening. So you're right that it's those are the 2 power players in this. And if you make a convincing case that the Big Ten is right, and it's like, it's pretty easy for the SEC now, just hop on board, and that's what's happening. No one is gonna have enough power to dethrone that decision.
Yeah, it's hard for the SEC to do it because they are so public with their stances. And obviously automatic qualifiers and people acting like this is the absolutely final thing and that it would do whatever it needs to be done. Their whole goal is to make nothing happen so it stays at 12, so it's exactly like it was. That's what the SEC and the Big 12 want. The Big 10, they have proven with their killing of the Pac-12 that they are willing to do whatever it takes to get their way. They've done that. The SEC, they've proven that they are the conference that wants to be out in the front. They want everybody to see them. They want to talk. They've got the media personalities. You can't be on the whims of the public response right now because it is always going to be negative, I think.
Yeah. And in the real short term, the 4-team automatic just makes so much sense to me if you're the Big Ten, because it's like you get your Ohio State, your Michigan, your Oregon, and your Penn State in every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
that's perfect. It keeps your big dogs happy. It keeps you relevant, and with a shot to win the college football playoff games every year. Makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, in the 4-4-2-2-1-3 or whatever it is, there are 3 at-large spots. So if your conference somebody shows out, they're going to get an at-large spot. But you look at conference championship Saturday. You have Ohio State versus, let's say, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Both of those teams are going to the college football playoff. And then you have 3 versus 6. You have a Penn State versus Michigan State game. You have a Michigan versus Illinois game that the winner of both of those go to the college football playoff. It's not even decided until the first week of December, your conference's bids. The same goes for the SEC. Let's say just for S&Gs, you've got Georgia versus Texas in the SEC championship game. They're going, but they're playing for a conference championship. Then you have Alabama versus Ole Miss. You have South Carolina versus LSU. Those 2 games for the other 2 playoff spots, I'm telling you, if you want to actually take care of the fans for the first time in the last decade, this would be the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's
when we
just
come
what we
back,
can't bank on.
Yes.
It's hard to bank on them taking care of fans, unfortunately.
No. In no way have they shown any propensity to take care of the fans. When we come back, we will start talking about the Ole Miss season and get Sam's opinion on the Ole Miss Rebels going into 2025. Stick around. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's game-winning shots or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and the same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same-game parlay? I mean, Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, and the Detroit Tigers are tailor-made for this with the best record in baseball. It feels like a pretty good bet. If Ole Miss is more your speed, they're currently a 37.5-point favorite against Georgia State in what would be Austin Simmons' starting debut. New to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place that first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Sam Hutchens from the Clarion Ledger joining us today, and he is in Oxford as we speak at the moment. One of the questions that's on the mind, we haven't talked to Sam in a couple of months, is what are the questions or concerns about this Ole Miss Rebels football team that he has his eyes on? What position stands out? Is he an Austin Simmons fan? Because that's going to be a major question going into the season. Sam, what has your attention right now?
Well, let's start there, Steven. Let us ask the question that no one in Oxford wants to ask, wants to address, the boogeyman question of Oxford. What if Austin Simmons isn't so good? And granted, we have seen pretty much no proof of that, and I am consider me one of the believers that I think Austin Simmons will be a top half quarterback in the SEC, and what he did against Georgia, as you know, was just incredibly impressive. It told me a lot more about his mental approach and his ability to slot in and lead a team than even the physical capability of him, like just crushing Middle Tennessee or Wake Forest or whoever he actually ran up the score on. So I believe he has the physical tools, but what sold me on the Austin Simmons being the leader and a guy who can get a team through adversity was that Georgia game. But that is still the question. What if Austin Simmons isn't so good? What if he comes out of the gates and struggles? The SEC schedule comes fast this year. There's no easy on-ramp like the Rebels had last year. So, those I think that our whole offseason narrative and looking at, what this team could be and saying Austin Simmons is going to be so great, I'm just saying that there is a danger in that whole plan kind of blowing up if Austin Simmons, if the Rebels lose the first SEC game, which I think is in week 2, in Austin Simmons maybe has 3 interceptions and throws for 180 yards. Is that a possibility? That's a possibility, right, Steven? I'm not even saying it's likely, but it's possible, right?
Yeah, it's not a 0% chance that it happens. That's on the table. It's not likely to happen because he went up against – he actually looked better than Arch Manning going against the same Georgia Bulldogs defense at home than Arch Manning did whenever he was put in that situation. So it's not a 0 chance, but it is not likely either. The thing that has my attention going into the season would be, what is the wide receiver room going to look like for Austin Simmons? Because we talk about Caden Lee, who is going to be the alpha dog of that room, and Deshaun Stribling and Harrison Wallace III, and the young guys that have been either recruited through the transfer portal like Caleb Odom or through the high school ranks like Winston Watkins and Caleb Cunningham. This is one of the most talented wide receiver units that Lane Kiffin has had at Ole Miss.
Totally agree. I think that is and especially let's throw in Luke Haas from Arkansas too, the tight end. I think he'll be a good addition. Obviously, along with you don't have your tight end room is already pretty strong going into the year. So I'm a big believer in the tight end position group, and what you mentioned the right guys. I think it's probably Lee, obviously, and then I'm a believer in both Stribling and Wallace. I used to cover Oklahoma State. I covered Stribling, and Deshaun Stribling's a fine player. He's a good player when he's healthy. But I think the beauty if you're Lane Kiffin this year is like that disclaimer when he's healthy. To me, it feels like we're sitting here in late June that you can almost absorb some injuries in that wide receiver room because it's so deep. We haven't even talked about Winnie Watkins or Caleb Cunningham. And we could see – this feels to me like the type of receiving room that you could have 7 players that have 100 yards in a game this year.
Yeah, it's possible. Now, we have to overcome history a little bit because the staff has shown a propensity not to play that many wide receivers. They've only played extra wide receivers when they had to. But this room is deep enough where you can legitimately go 7, 8, 9 deep. I mean, we didn't even mention Ray out of West Virginia or Deuce Alexander out of Wake Forest. There's some serious skill and talent available, and that's going to help out Austin Simmons. You talk about your first point. This wide receiver room, we didn't even talk about Daquan Wright, who's likely going to be the starter at tight end. Had a really good year and was kind of the starting tight end a year ago.
Yeah.
So that's going to help out Austin Simmons as well. The question that I tend to have about this team moving forward is in the DB room. Whenever you see what's going on, Austin Simmons might be a question of how he's going to do in the season. The DB room is another position that needs to be paid attention to. I like Jalen Braxton. I think Ricky Fletcher has shown out, and they're expecting him to do some stuff at cornerback. Chris Graves has played a lot of football. Cedric Beavers could be primed to move to the next level. He's a guy out of Jones, Mississippi. You're not familiar with it because you're not from Mississippi, but there's always this cornerback out of a JUCO in Mississippi that turns into a major, major player in the history of Ole Miss Mississippi State, everybody in the state. Cedric Beavers is kind of primed to do that as well. My concern is at the safety position. I think Trey Washington and John Saunders were two major contributors on this defense over the last couple of years. And Sage Ryan might do it. They're moving TJ Banks over to, I guess, where John Saunders is. They have some pieces, but it is kind of a wait and see kind of moment. And we're not going to actually know probably until the Georgia State game.
Agreed. That to me, it not only feels like the position group that we'll be looking up in week one, and we'll be like, wait, what number is that? Who is it that made that play? But that to me feels, again, in late June when we can say whatever and rosters are so far from even being, determined a depth chart wise. But that to me feels like the thinnest room. There's talent there, but I'm not sure how far deep that goes. And maybe the answer is that this defense, it won't be as good as last year. And I think that's okay. And I think that's probably the only reasonable expectation to say right here with after having a historical defense last year that was, I'll say top 5 scoring defense just to get the stat right. But I think it was 2 or 3 off the top of my head last year. So obviously I'm not saying that didn't really start too much in the secondary. A lot of that was the defensive line that was getting after it. But no, that's probably the right position group to point to, Steven. I'm with you there in terms of we still need to see what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and the front 7 is probably the answer of how you take care of that safety group, because the front 7 getting after the quarter, whether it's Suntarine Perkins or Cam Franklin or Prince Will Amon-Mielon or Xavion Harris or William Eccles or Jam Brown, whoever is playing on the defensive line, they're going to have a good run defense. They have the people in place to have a good run defense. They need to get after the quarterback to where it makes life a little bit easier on that secondary, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what Prince Will brings to the table. Just after Prince Lee, and it just feels like such an easy, plug and play, like Prince will be great. I almost think it's unfair to heap expectations upon him as, hey, go and be an NFL draft pick like your brother. But that's kind of, it feels like Kiffin he reloaded with enough talent, Golding and all them, to make it a possibility that there are some more NFL draft picks on that defensive line. I'm very excited to see what Womack brings to the table out of LSU coming around. But yeah, it's I think you said the first name out of your mouth is that Perkins. I think he's going to have a monster year. He had a great year last year, but I think Perkins is going to be the undisputed guy this year.
It's crazy that the returning leader in the Southeastern Conference for sacks and tackles for loss is just an afterthought whenever you look at preseason lists.
Right. And especially with what it was like, did you see who he, there were other people that were taking up all these sacks and stuff too. He shined last year on a defense that had stars everywhere. That was impressive to me, that how easy it would have been for him to kind of fade off and just be another player. But Perkins was always the shining light last year of like, oh, well, he'll be coming back. He'll be locked in for next year. He'll be good.
All right. When we come back, we will talk to Sam about Chris Beard and the press conference he had last week. I know we had an exclusive interview on the show yesterday, but what he said to the media gathering, that interests everybody as well. So stick around for that. All right, Sam, yesterday on the show, I had an opportunity to speak with Chris Beard. Pretty good interview. People that are watching this show for Sam can tune in to that. It's on the YouTube page as well. It's on ABC 24. It's on all of your fast channels of Locked On. It's everywhere. It's a pretty big deal. But he had an interview, I guess the 17th. Something like that is when he met the press. And what was your impressions of Chris and the 2025 Ole Miss team? What did you learn? What do we need to know?
I thought the thing that jumped out, and we'll get into, roster construction and all that, I imagine, but I thought the thing that kind of jumped out to me was something that, Chris Beard almost like assigned us media members homework. He's like, guys, Chris Beard recognizes the importance of getting this team's the 2025-26 Rebel basketball team story out, because Beard, he was like, hey, everyone on this team is new. Obviously, Malik Dia, is coming back. Eduardo Klafke's coming back. But other than that, it's almost an entirely new squad. If you look at there will be fans who look at the box score and they, in the first game, and they'll be confused. They'll be looking at rosters, trying to figure out who everyone is. And I think that was at least what I was impressed about Beard, that I would think that more coaches would lean into it, is Beard's like, hey, we're going to be bringing everyone out for interviews. You're going to talk to everyone with the intention, Beard says, of like, you only have what, and especially really once football ends, you have what, like 3 months for a basketball team to build a connection with the fan base and get the momentum going again, especially when everyone's new. So it felt to me like that seemed a big priority on Beard's list, is to, hey, get this team ingrained in the community, get this team an identity, and have something for these fans, to cheer for and root for, and some personal touches before March Madness.
One interesting part is I talked to Chris and asked him directly. It's like, last year you recruited a whole bunch of players, and by the end of the season, they were playing really good basketball. They clicked at the right time. They did everything the way that you would plan on a group of transfers doing. And this year you have to do it again. What is that like? How do you handle that? And he mentioned that, hey, at least there's an NCAA tournament at the end. There's a compass of when you want to be playing your best, and you kind of work backwards from there. Did he say anything like that to your press conference?
Yeah. And Beard, one of his lines that I like is he's saying, his goal is to finish playing on a Monday. Obviously, that means, his goal with every team is to finish playing in the national championship game, always on that Monday after Final Four weekend. And yeah, it's a challenge. Beard said he recruited high character guys. He said that was all he was after in the portal. Granted, I think like every coach says that, but the evidence last year was that, that was a high character team that came together and was, by all reports, on and off the record, a high character squad that really gelled. So the proof is in the pudding a little bit that, even if the transfer portal's like speed dating a little bit, these coaches, they do have the chance to feel people out, talk to everyone else, and figure out what kind of character, what kind of players you're bringing in to attempt to gel in the span of 6 months or whatever. So Beard said that again, that was his intention, was to do that.
Sam Hutchens from the Clarion Ledger, the Ole Miss beat writer. What do you got going on this week, bud?
Well, I'm getting back on the train. I recently got back from a little trip in California. I didn't even have cell reception or anything out there on a ranch for a buddy's wedding, so that was great. But I had a fun story that just came out. Fun until people get in my emails and start roasting me for it. But I ranked, and I wanted to get your take on this, Steven. I ranked the top 5 moments this last athletic year from Ole Miss. And it's obviously pretty wide open and objective, but I was wondering, do you think we had the same number 1 moment from Ole Miss athletics last year?
I think the number 1 moment was the win over Iowa State to go to the Sweet 16.
Okay, I had that as number 2. I had that run to the final, to the Sweet 16 as number 2. My number 1 was November 9th, 2024, the win over Georgia.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to put football as the number 1 because football ultimately kind of let down. So the win over Georgia, if Ole Miss would have followed that up with the win over Florida and made it into the college football playoff, would have been absolutely the slam dunk number 1. It would be that. Chris Beard in his second year equaling the best season in Ole Miss basketball history. I think that becomes number one. I think the girls going to their first Women's College World Series has to be on that list as well. Coach Yo going to the Sweet 16, that has to be on that as well. But the Georgia win would be in the top 5, no doubt.
And that was the interesting thing almost about this year as a whole. Like, if we had the impossible task of summarizing it in like one sentence that applied across the board, it was like the same story for baseball. It felt like there were so many great moments last year, but it kind of ended in disappointment, especially football and baseball. You had two great teams that ended in disappointment. So it was kind of a weird mix of like, at the end of the day, if your number one moment came in November, that's not a super successful year for the football team. At the end of the day, however you slice it.
Yeah, that's exactly how that goes. Anyway, Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We'll have to catch up a little bit later on. In our final segment, Chris Beard actually met with the media this week, not just this podcast, but we break down what Sam Hutchens learned from that press gathering. From it all next. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, and we are the front door of Ole Miss. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes around college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.